Thank you for joining me for another video. If you've been following along with me for the last God knows how long, we've been going over the book of Genesis. So in my previous video that just came out this week, I was discussing mostly the Nephilim, and there is one thing that I wanted to say about it that I felt honestly deserves its own video, and that is the identity, or the identification I should say, of the Nephilim as giants. So with that in mind, let's talk about giants. So there is a trend in several English translations, and I assume it's probably that way in translations into other languages as well, where the biblical translators will, in Genesis 6:4 and a few other places, will insert the word giants as a translation of the word Nephilim. Now, that's kind of a weird translation. I was really curious as to where exactly that idea came from. I was like, well, I mean, English, okay, so the English, they have in their ancestral folklore, they have legends of giants. Jack and the Beanstalk is a prime example. You have in Ireland, they've got traditions of giant. In fact, there are megaliths, I think is the right word, in Ireland and off the coast of Ireland that the Irish actually attribute to a race of giants. You see the same thing in Scandinavian folklore, where giants are a real thing. In fact, in the Norse religion, giants play a very literally foundational role in the creation of the cosmos. So giants, and also you see it in the Greco-Roman world, you see it in really all across Europe. And I apologize if you hear any noises of anything behind me, cars and whatnot, aeroplanes overhead. I'm going to try not to get distracted by them, and I hope you do too. So within European, at least European folklore, there are traditions of giants. So I assumed at first that, so these translations that have the word giants in them, in Genesis 6:4 and other places as well, they've been influenced by their native folklore. Well, turns out I was only partly right. Yes, giant human beings did exist in, and still do exist in, folklore from all across Europe, and in fact all over the world, but there is another reason that it's actually in English translations of the Bible, and it actually dates back to one of the very first Old English translations. And when I say Old English, you very likely would not be able to read it. It is a very different language, very Germanic. And by Germanic in this case I mean very close to German, because I mean we're talking about the Anglo-Saxon language. Okay, in the 10th or 11th century, roughly, there was a man named Alfred who made a translation of what's called the Heptateuch, Hexateuch, which is a translation of the 5 books of Moses plus the book of Joshua, I believe, from the Hebrew into Old English. And in his Genesis 6:4, it uses the Old English word for giants. In Middle English, you had John Wycliffe when he made edition in, I think it was 1382. He used the word giants. Now, Middle English Okay, modern English speakers can vaguely figure out what's meant. That sounded like an aeroplane on the street. I hope that's not the case. It's going to hit a tree. That poor tree. What was I talking? Oh yeah, so the Middle English. If you pick up a Wycliffe Bible, you may actually be able to understand the majority of it, but it also uses the Middle English term for giants, which I believe is actually spelled the same way but pronounced differently to the modern word giant. And in modern English, you have the first mention of the word giant in 1611, so a little over 400 years ago. And it's written in early modern English. It is a little bit strange for those of you who are not used to, all the these and thous and whatnot. But as it happens, I love that sort of language. So I do have notes. Let me just consult my notes for a second. Yes, so there are around 20 translations that render the word Nephilim as giants in English. Now it happens that there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of English translations of the book of Genesis. So to say that that those 20 versions that have the word giants make up the majority is it's not just an exaggeration, it's an outright, blatant, in-your-face lie. Okay, so we are talking about a very small minority of translations here, but at the same time, we're also dealing with influential translations. The Wycliffe Bible is still looked at by modern students of fields that might use it: religion, translation, related jobs, linguists, linguistics, I should say, those sorts of jobs. So you are going to find the word giants in the King James Version in Genesis 6:4. And the reason that you find it there is the same reason that you find it also in other versions, and that's that they came to the word Nephilim and had no idea what it meant. So they consulted older translations, in this case Greek and Latin translations. The Greek and Roman fathers, church fathers, they when they made their translations, Jerome famously made the Latin Vulgate. When they made their translations, they included the word for giant in place of Nephilim in Greek and Latin. And the reason that they did that, honestly, is beyond me, although I do think that it probably is not necessarily related to local folklore about giants. I think that it's more related to these were intellectual giants, or these were cultural giants, cultural heroes, that sort of thing, in their minds that translated to giants, and so that's how they translated it in their versions, and that's how it came into ultimately the Alfrich's Hexateuch, Wycliffe's Bible, and the King James Version of the Bible. Now the King James Version of the Bible happens to be the one of the oldest, if not the oldest, authorized version of the Bible, and by the Bible, you need to understand, I am using the term loosely here because it includes books that I, as a Jew, don't accept. It includes books that Protestant Christians don't accept, and it excludes books that Orthodox Christians accept. It has the what's called the Old Testament, that's the Tanakh, and the New Testament, which would be, I call it the Christian Bible. And I mean no offense by that. I just mean that, Jews, we have the Tanakh. Christians took our Tanakh, yes, and they combined it with their New Testament to produce what we have now as the Christian Bible. But when I say Christian Bible, specifically I'm referring to the 27 books of the canonical New Testament in Western tradition, not the Ethiopian tradition. We're not going to talk about those guys. They got 91 books in their Bible. We're not talking about them. Okay, Protestant canons of the Bible have 66 books. Catholic versions, I believe, have 73 books. Orthodox versions, I believe, have right around 73. I think it's a couple more. But that's not important. What is important here, though, is the King James Version also had the Apocrypha. I think like 20-something books, or 9 or something. I don't know. I can't remember, man. I'm not a Christian, so I don't really keep up with what books are considered apocryphal and which ones aren't. You know, I do know that a lot of them are actually Jewish books, but that's not important. Not to this video, anyway. I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So to say that... oh, and by the way, before I get into that thought, almost no Jewish translations into English have the word giants in place of Nephilim. Most Jewish translations actually just leave the word untranslated. So the majority of actually all of the 20 or so versions of the book of Genesis in English that translated as giants are actually going to be Christian versions. No, you know, slight toward them. No, you know, the King James Version is. I love the King James Version, mostly from a literary perspective, mostly from a linguistic perspective. I find it to be beautiful. That style of language. I disagree on a number of their translation choices, but that's, you know, a topic for a different time, perhaps. They did the best with what they had, and it happens that the King James Version is probably the most influential translation in the Anglophone world. So, lest you think that I'm saying, oh, it's those stupid Christians that believe in giants and they threw it in there, I need to tell you, there are stupid Jews. No, just kidding. There are Jews who preserve traditions of giants as well. Our traditions, though, are a little bit more fantastical than the Christian versions of it, because ours are not meant to be literal. Let me give you an example. There is a tradition that Adam, the first man, according to the book of Genesis, was 200 ells tall. Now, if you don't know what an ell is, I've got measurements. So 200 ells equals just a little bit over 228 meters, or exactly 750 feet. It's a little too fantastical, in my opinion, to be taken literally, because, like, you know, it's a tall dude. He towers over most tall buildings. Now, if you do an image search online, you know, say you just type in giants or whatever the case may be, you are going to see a bunch of images of, you know, giant skeletons. You know, some of them, some of the pictures are going to be archaeological digs where someone is excavating a gigantic human skull, or perhaps even a gigantic, wow, I can't speak today, not even in English, perhaps even a gigantic human skeleton. And by gigantic, you know, you're looking at the picture, you see the archaeologist, you know, who is, let's say, roughly 5'10", right? That's roughly the average height for a man in the United States. So you've got roughly a 5'10" man, right? And you could see just this gigantic skeleton that's at least 2 or 3 of him. I need to tell you right now, and it would be horribly dishonest, to imply that some of them might be real, but every single one of those is a fake. Okay, they were fabricated either just for fun. Some people playing around with AI or Photoshop or whatever the case may be, or they were intentionally fabricated with the intent to deceive people. Perhaps to fool them into believing in giants because, hey, my King James Bible says there were giants on the earth in those days. It's a direct quote, by the way, from Genesis 6:4 in the King James Version. The tallest man in recorded history was a man called Robert Wadlow. Okay, he was the tallest verified man in recorded history. He stood at 8 feet and 11.1 inches, or for those of you using the metric system, 272 centimeters tall. Before I finish talking about Mr. Wadlow, let's talk about the square cube law. Okay, humans don't grow to gigantic proportions because there are scientific reasons behind it. The laws of physics don't let us do it. Okay, there aren't any giants out there, giant humans out there in the Jack and the Beanstalk sort of vein of thought. There never have been. There probably never will be. And the reason is, if you want to look at the square cube law, and you can look this up online if you so desire, it says that if you increase the size of any given shape, that shape's volume grows faster than its surface area, right? So to put that into more layman's terms, okay, your insides grow faster than your outsides, okay? Now, if you were to apply that to a human, you'll find that as the person's size increases, so I'm roughly 6 feet tall. I say roughly because, I can't remember if the last time I sized myself up, I was wearing shoes or not, so I'm right around 6 feet tall. So if we apply that to a human, you take a 6 foot tall human and you double my size, right? Just for argument's sake. You scale up my size by 2, by a factor of 2. Okay, the cross section of this human's muscles is going to be increased by the square of the scaling factor, while his mass would increase by the cube of the scaling factor. Now that's significantly going to reduce muscle strength. Okay, basically once you reach a certain height, you get to be too big to support your own weight. Mr. Wadlow, standing at a whopping 8 foot 11.1 inches, almost 9 feet exactly, he could not support his own weight. Okay, he had so much trouble walking that they actually had to put leg braces on him to help hold him up, to help keep him from collapsing under his own weight, which at the time of his death, when he was 22 years old, that's a fun statistic right there. Even though he was around 2 feet taller than I am, and he was actually scrawnier. If you look at the pictures of him and you look at me, he is probably about half my size in terms of bulk, but the guy's only like 2 feet taller than me. You're right, 2 feet taller than me. Forgot where I was going with that. Oh yeah, he was double my weight. Actually, he was more than double my weight, right? So he weighed, I want to say, in the 438-ish pound range. Okay, I actually do know it in kilometers, not kilometers, in kilograms. He was 199 kilograms. That only stands out to me because it's one less than 200. Silly to me. You know, come on, give him an extra kilo. It's all right, you know. Or take 4 away. I'm okay with multiples of 5. That's how it should be. But nobody ever asked me. So his muscles could not physically grow and strengthen fast enough to support him. Okay, he died at age 22, and he actually died as a result, not as a direct result, but as a result, indirectly, of his size. His great size is both what made him remarkable in terms of his physical form, and it was also his greatest physical weakness, right? Now, what does that mean for us? Well, that means that giants in the Tanakh, or any English translation of it, are not really giants, not in the Jack and the Beanstalk sort of vein of thought. So let's talk about David and Goliath, right? David, let's assume that he's 5.5 feet tall. Okay, that was, let's call it the mid-range maximum for his time frame, location, ethnicity, you know, that sort of thing. So he's about 5.5 feet tall. That's 5 foot 6 inches. That's being generous, because most men back then were actually about 3 inches shorter. So I'm being generous by giving him those extra 3 inches. Goliath, on the other hand, we're told that he was 6 cubits in a span, right? So a cubit is going to be the distance between roughly the inside of the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. So it's roughly around 18 inches. That's pretty big, but it's not meant to be literal. Okay? And in fact, one of the Greek translations of it actually says, let's say it corrects the Hebrew to, instead of saying 6 cubits in a span, we're talking, you know, a little bit closer to 4 cubits in a span. A span, by the way, is half of a cubit. It's approximately 9 inches. So we're talking Goliath is really, realistically, not much bigger than a basketball player. So let's put him around, let's call it 8 feet, versus, you know, a guy who's, you know, half a foot shorter than I am. You know, 5 foot 6 David, you know, young man, versus a guy who's, you know, 1.5 feet or so taller than him. I mean, yeah, I'd call that a giant. When it uses the term giant in Scripture, well, it doesn't actually use the term giant, but I mean in English translations, it's meant to allude to his abnormally large size, to his, I have it written down, his abnormally large size, the fact that they were frightening due to their size, and as a metaphorical giant, perhaps in the case of the Nephilim, as we discussed in the previous video on part 1 of Genesis 6, where I mentioned that they were, you know, in addition to being actually physically larger, better nourished, because the food from up in the mountain region from whence they came was more rich in vitamins and everything than the food down in the plains region where they eventually settled. And really, to say that they were giants, I mean, it would have to relate to their intellectual capacity, because, I mean, remember, these are the guys who cut canals. These are the guys who expanded cropland. These are the guys who, were mining copper. They were mining bitumen. They were establishing trade relationships. These men are truly giants, but not in the literal sense, more in the metaphorical sense. So, that's all I got. I just wanted to take a video to talk about giants. Giant humans never existed. Any picture that you find online is going to be faked, and they probably never will exist. Unless we figure out a way around the square cube law. Otherwise, once you reach almost 9 feet tall, you're not actually able to support your body weight. Okay. That being said, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like. Feel free to share it with anyone you'd like. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure that your notifications are turned on so that you get to see whenever I put out a new video. If you're on Facebook, so am I. That's wonderful. Go ahead and just look for an unorthodox Jew. Come find me, and you can strike up a conversation with me. You can share my videos and other content that's there to your Facebook if you so desire. Even if you're just saying, I disagree, but I think it's interesting, that kind of a thing. Because I don't doubt that most of you disagree. But it is interesting, right? Right. If you have questions, I love questions. Absolutely love questions. Next week I'm planning to tackle Zionism. So you may want to tune in for that video. Not that you won't have access to it anytime you have access to the internet, right? Free to ask. You can ask in the comments, or if it's one of those questions that maybe you don't want people to know that it was you that asked, okay, so you can send me a private message and ask your question. I'll answer you, and I might actually make your question into a video. With all of that being said, until next time, shalom. Cut.